Hello and welcome to an impromptu episode of the 21st Century Work-Life podcast. My name is Pilar. I'm your host. And the reason we're releasing this episode is I was recording for a future episode on transitioning to remote. And my guest said, "Do you want to talk about the coronavirus?" And I said, well, yes, let's. So we've just recorded this little conversation about what she's seeing. Jacqui works for a communications agency. So as well as the people within her organization who are having to work from home, she's also hearing about other people. So I thought it was interesting. We don't go into much depth, but I thought it was worth sharing. This podcast is about bringing voices together, helping to amplify what's going on in the conversations that we hear about in the remote space. So I thought it'd be worth sharing it with you. The podcast is brought to you by Virtual Not Distant. You can find lots of information over at our website. And we specialize in helping leaders of remote teams work with their teams. We facilitate the transition to an office optional approach. And though our specialty is not working from home, it's online collaboration, we do have an episode that might be of interest if you and your team are having to spend some time working from home. And that's episode 208. It's called Working from Home and Staying Healthy. And it's a conversation between Maya Middlemiss, my colleague, and myself. We released it last year, 26 September 2019. So I hope you enjoy that. But for now, I'm going to leave you with our conversation with Jacqui from Peppercom. Well, this is an impromptu episode, listeners, because, I was setting up to record with Jacqui Walpole, who I'll introduce in a second. And we were actually recording for an episode that's coming up about transitioning to remote. But of course, she mentioned, shall we talk about the coronavirus? And I thought, and then she said a couple of things where I thought, you know what, let's just do this for about 10 minutes, share this with listeners. I think it's an interesting perspective. And so, we have a coronavirus special, listeners. So Jacqui Walpole, Senior Vice President of Peppercom, welcome to the 21st Century Work-Life podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Pilar.
So as we were saying, in fact, as you were saying, you are working with people who are, because of this, let's call it this very special situation with the coronavirus, where a lot of people are deciding to work from home or being asked to work from home or having to work from home. What is it that you are hearing about how people are thinking about that, and also about whether they're thinking about what this might mean in the future, how they're thinking about how they're working? What are you hearing, Jacqui? And who are you hearing it from?
Well, from my own experience with my firm, one of the things that we're starting to think about is, okay, what are our policies for folks who are still working in the office most consistently? There's a sense that we need to rethink, does it make sense for people to come to the office, for one? And if those individuals who would normally be going in have a situation with their families where schools might be closed for an indefinite amount of time, how do we restructure quickly and support them in their sort of either temporary or longer term transition to remote working, using some of the best practices that some of us who already do that on a daily basis can kind of share with them. So it's, about getting not only yourself in a mindset where you're used to working remotely, but then also tapping into the colleagues who have that experience overall. And saying, okay, how do I do this most effectively? How do I do this, when there are potentially kids home and yelling in the background? How do we make sure to set apart some space and think through, what my primary role is as a parent or as somebody who's caring for others who might be in lockdown and isolated, while also still keeping the business going in a normal sort of way, or as normal as possible. So that's one thing from our firm that we're trying to work through and think through and support each other on. But the other thing that's interesting, because we are a communications agency, a lot of the work that we do obviously is to support our clients. And what we're seeing is that there's a lot of disruption right now as far as traveling goes. Some of our clients have put on a full ban for their there are individuals who might be, for instance, coming from the UK, and we have a media tour set up for them in the States. So how do you rethink what that looks like if they can't come to the States, they physically can't be here? How do you make sure that you are using video tools or other sorts of interactions with reporters that we would have otherwise been setting them up with? How do you think through, okay, what other vehicles are available for us to use instead of maybe doing a TV broadcast? Are there podcasts and things with that outlet that we can start to help them think through? The other piece of it is a lot of these companies have either events that their spokespeople are going to or supposed to be going to that might still be taking place, but because of their travel ban, they can't send a spokesperson. So how do you not lose that opportunity to get your message out there when you had something set up in that way? Or, if you yourself, your company has a bespoke event that you're supposed to be hosting, how do you think through all of the different ideas of how do you get other people who might not be able to get there involved in that without totally disrupting your plans? So there's a lot going on from that perspective, and just how do we have more of a virtual interaction for ourselves, for our employees, for our clients, and do it in a way that still keeps a seamless sort of a feel as possible.
Yeah, because you're right. It's not only about the people that we work directly day to day. If we are in business, we have a lot of other people who we interact with or that we do business with. And some of that does involve getting to places. It is very wide. So what's the setup at your company?
At least we are connected using Teams, and we have been for a while. So we don't rely as heavily on email as we might have in the past, or even just face-to-face meetings. We do a lot of video calls on Teams. We do a lot of our back and forth with documents and things that way. So as far as when somebody has to go remote, they have their work laptop, so they have their kind of ability to actually go and continue to do their work in that way. But I think there are some kind of rules of the road that until you get into the habit of working remotely and really feel confident in doing that you might not be as able to jump into if you don't have some experience from other team members on doing that. So it is interesting. There's some tapping here and there that is going on just to say, okay, well, how do I do this exactly? I mean, you and I had that issue on Skype, and it's even just as simple as sometimes setting up sort of the tools that you can use and making sure you have more access to more of them, and you're using it in a way that others can use very quickly and easily as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, because we forget also when we are used to using technology every day for communicating, we forget that we become quite adept at swapping, at troubleshooting, at changing, and that just adds to the stressful situation if you're not used to it.
Yes, and I think sometimes people, if they're not used to switching like that, they can kind of have a total breakdown on that side and say, okay, let's just cancel this. We'll try it another time. Yeah. That's not going to work. We have to keep moving.
And I think that the very interesting point you made right at the very beginning about people who are having to work from home, who are not set up, their computers are not set up, their workspaces are not set up. Plus, because this is not just something that's happening in offices, it's happening all around us. We've also got those issues of, well, if we're caring for people, if we're having a different setup at home also, because we might have children. Exactly. How do you hear or what are you feeling? I don't know. How are those people going to cope, Jacqui?
I don't know. I think, some people have a lucky situation where, they either have some additional support at home where people can kind of tap in, tap out as they need to throughout the day. And some people have that unique situation where they have at least some sort of opportunity to close the door when needed. But for folks, especially in urban settings where you're living in an apartment, I think it's going to be a lot trickier for actually having those kind of lines set up and those different kind of places where people can go to get that moment of quiet and clarity and focus when they need it, especially for video calls and things, so that you don't have a situation like that poor guy and self-free with your babies rolling into the BBC interview. So I think, it's just a matter of you have to rethink your space sometimes too. If it is like setting up a temporary fake wall behind you and just, making it really clear to individuals when you have to have a separate kind of a situation to focus on a call, people are going to get kind of creative in how they rearrange some of their furniture. It's as simple as that sometimes. Moving a bookcase behind you so there's a little bit of extra space when you're in that kind of a tight quarters scenario.
So I suppose what we're saying in a very impromptu conversation that wasn't planned, but a podcast, it's our show, we can do what we want, is that this is quite a interesting situation, as in there's lots of factors that will affect how people can or not adapt to work from home. And I suppose what's coming through for me is the empathy that we need to have with each other if we've never done this before, or also with those people who are trying it for the first time. For those of us who've been doing it for ages, and that it's not just about how we're doing the work, but also, I suppose, how we're coping with this change in a very short time, how we're coping with it personally also.
And you did ask too, just about how people are going to be able to manage with kids and things. I do wonder if we're not only going to see a flexibility as far as location, but timing for when things are getting done. So if you need to wait until the kids are asleep to really focus in and do your deep work, that's, I think, to your point about empathy, we have to work together and find different types of flexibility in these unique kinds of situations to allow for work to happen in a different time than it normally would.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, Jacqui, are you active on Twitter or LinkedIn or any social media?
I am, yes. I'm Jacqui Walpole on Twitter, and you can find me using Jacqui Walpole on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Well, listeners, that's JACQUI and then WALPOLE, because I don't know what's going to happen with show notes for this one. But thank you, Jacqui. It's wonderful to talk to you. And well, listeners, we're going to continue talking, but look after yourselves. And that's it, listeners. We will be back to our normal program this Thursday. If you have any questions, any thoughts, virtualnotdistant.com. There's a contact form there. Check out our services. They might come in handy at some point. We also have 2 books, Thinking Remote and Online Meetings That Matter, which is a guide for managers of remote teams. To be honest, I'm not sure how much use the book will be if you have to run a meeting tomorrow and you've never run an online meeting. However, if you're thinking this is something you're going to be needing to do in the future, it's well worth a read. At the moment, it's only available on ebook format, but later on this month, I hope to have the paperback for you. Anyway, listeners, thank you very much for listening. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, enjoy.